This week on the Four Rivers Ag Report, we hear from angels on high, or at least up north.
Also, we check on the hopefully green fields of Greenfield.
And when is a gator not a croc?
We'll have that and more on the Four Rivers Ag Report.
Welcome to the Four Rivers Ag Report. I'm Fred Peralta.
And I'm Monica Becker. The big news around here is that it hasn't rained much over the last several days. And I don't know about you, but I've been seeing farmers out and about all week. On Tuesday, I counted at least 12 planters between Charleston and the Douglas County line. Those farmers must not be sowing their wild oats, but rather their soybeans.
And in a hurry, so we got on the horn and contacted the soybean farmer of some repute and a board member of the Illinois Soybean Association, Ross Pro, to find out what's been happening statewide. With me now is Ross Pro. He's a at-large board member for the Illinois Soybean Association, and he's, more importantly, a farmer in Greenfield, Illinois. And Ross, how is, we've paid a lot of attention to late start on corn. How are we doing on beans?
Well, we got our farm planted last Friday. We finished up, so we got another dry spell in, and we got them in, and so far we haven't had any hard rain on them. We just had a light shower Sunday evening, so we're in good shape at the moment.
Now, a lot of farmers were worried about planting some very soggy fields. With the is compaction a serious issue with soybean more so than corn?
I don't think it's quite as bad as corn because it does have the ability to root down in harder places than corn will. But you know, this type of year, you're going to have spots that are going to compact. There's just no way around it. But as I told my custom planter, I said, you know, we've worked all this farm and we haven't gotten stuck. So, you know, considering we had 3.5 inches of rain a week ago, I think we've come out pretty good on that in that respect.
I think so too. Now, the NASS crop survey says that 61% of the soybeans in the state have been planted. I imagine that number is going to go quite a bit this week, don't you?
I would assume, because there were a lot of beans went in the end of from midweek last week to the end of the week. It rained various amounts around the area here. Right here at the farm, we had 2 or 3 tenths, but 4 or 5 miles east of me, they had 7 tenths. So, you know, it was enough to rain them out for a little while. So
now, a lot was made about corn acres not getting planted that might roll over to beans. Is the bean market taking that into account? Are they worried about that?
You know, I don't know how to judge this bean market. I cleaned out my
an honest man. Thank you. We finally found one.
I cleaned out my beans last week, so they'll go up now.
What's the next milestone we need to keep an eye out for beans?
Well, you know, if you don't get any hard rain on them, you get them out of the ground, then just start watching and checking and see if you've got any insects. And we put down the Precept and for weed control. And so we're just, we'll keep an eye on things. And if we have to come back and spray again, why we'll be watching that. I post pictures for SoyCam, which you can get from.
Talk a little bit about SoyCam. That came out in the press release today, and really that's sort of a neat idea.
Well, we've got 8 or so farmers up and down the state that are taking pictures and posting, and we can watch the bean crop grow, and it's an incentive for me to get out there every 7 to 10 days to take pictures and kind of watch the crop and see what's going on and keep my crop consultant up to date when we need to possibly put on some insecticide or fungicide or anything like that.
Well, I'll be checking it out every week, and Ross, we'll be checking back with you during the course of the summer, see how things are going in your section. Of course, this is God's country, so you're right next door to a God's country, right?
Oh yes, we are.
Okay,
every time we come home,
I'll accept
God's
that
country.
sarcasm.
I know.
Oh, well, thank you. Ross Perot, board member for the Illinois Soybean Association, a farmer and a good guy with technology. So thank you, Ross.
Well, we had our problems today, but we finally got it up and running, and you just have to be persistent.
Thank you, Ross.
You're welcome.
The big news this week was the Farm Bill passing, the Senate at least. And here with that and more to drone on about is Monica Becker.
On Monday, the Senate passed a 5-year farm bill with a 66-24 margin. Now the hard part, getting the House to pass a version in time to get into conference. The bill has a look of compromise. Everyone lost something and everyone got something. The bill would cut some farm subsidies while expanding crop insurance, and it continues food stamps and nutrition programs for low-income families. All told, the bill the Senate passed is estimated to save $17.9 billion over 10 years. The House bill, if it gets to the floor, is similar in many of the farm programs, but is much more harsh to the social programs that have traditionally been part of the bill. Stay tuned. Speaking of staying tuned, the soap opera that is the 2013 planting season appears to be wrapping up. The several days of non-flood allowed farmers all over the state to plant any remaining land that is above water, and it showed in this week's crop report. Corn is reported at 96% planted, just behind the 5-year average of 98%. And any seed planted appears to be happy because statewide, corn emerged is at 89%. Average height is at 10 inches. Locally, we're right at the state average with 98% planted and 89% emerged. The numbers on Monday showed that statewide soybeans are at 62% planted and 43% emerged, again mirroring our numbers at 61% planted and 41% emerged. Expect much higher numbers next week. Despite the fact that there is a promising corn crop in the ground, there is still many acres unplanted.
I think the consensus is that planted acres of corn might fall 3 to 4 million acres short of intentions of 97.3 million. And that's probably a reasonable thought at this point. And, you know, rough numbers would say if you believe USDA's kind of generous forecast, anything above 150 bushel corn would be an ample supply if we lose 4 million acres. I think at this juncture we have prospects for yield at least at that level and probably considerably higher. You know, under the scenario that we have 155 bushel corn or better on 87 million harvested, I would say December corn is a little on the high side, maybe not by a lot, but I'm not sure we would need cash prices above $5 under that scenario, and right now we're slightly above that. So I think it would give us some downside if that kind of crop materializes, but I wouldn't look for an extreme decline from the levels that we're at right now.
The USDA will release official numbers at the end of this month. Now, turning to beans.
I think we're still probably looking at 43 bushel beans or better for the U.S., and we might actually pick up a few acres of soybeans depending on what happens to the intended corn acres. And so I think we still have prospects for a very large soybean crop. And this rally that we've seen that's pushed prices back above the spring insurance price may be just a little bit overdone, but again, at this early juncture, I think it's legitimate to have some production risk reflected in the market. November soybean futures temporarily moved well above that insurance price. It's dropped back down a bit now so that we're just marginally higher. And so I'm still of the mind that we don't need to be real aggressive if we have fairly high insurance coverage at this level on both corn and soybeans.
Experts say soybean demand should stay strong. Many of those same experts say probably not $14 plus soybeans, but well above the long-term averages. Farmers, especially no-tillers, are very concerned about weed control in their soybean fields this year. Todd Gleason reports some burned-down herbicide applications failed to kill everything.
The mare's tail, or horseweed, isn't dying in every soybean field sprayed with herbicides prior to planting this year, and University of Illinois Extension wheat scientist Aaron Hager has been hearing about it a lot.
One of the most common questions that we've had in the last 10 days is about the lack of control or the poor control of horseweed or mare's tail, especially with burn down herbicides that were applied for no-till soybean prior to no-till soybean planting. And in many cases, the burn down would have consisted of something either, say, glyphosate by itself or glyphosate combined with 2,4-D and perhaps even a residual herbicide. Many of the field complaints that we've actually looked at, the mare's tail has shown some evidence of twisting up from the 2,4-D, but many of the plants are going to eventually survive the burn down application. So a lot of questions have been asked about what we can do now that the soybean are planted, but the mare's tail are still alive.
Not such a big deal for mare's tail, horse wheat that survived the burn down in corn. There are plenty of products to remedy that weedy problem. Soybean, however, is at best a bad situation.
Really, the only viable options that farmers have for controlling the emerged mare's tail in soybean would be products that contain the active ingredients of chloranthalam, which is marketed as first rate, or chlorimuron, which is marketed as classic. And these products, typically the labels would allow applications after soybean, the first trifoliate leaf has expanded, and typically the label would list mare's tail up to about 6 inches in height as being controlled by these particular products. They're usually always going to be combined with glyphosate and glyphosate-resistant soybeans.
So that 6-inch thing, it's the problem, and likely means the weeds will have to be removed mechanically.
So with if all else fails, it may seem to many to be something that's less than desirable to do, but physically removing the remaining mare's tail would be advisable.
This is a weed that can outcompete the soybean and produce up to 200,000 seeds per plant. No-till farmers may have to resort to walking their fields with a hoe or a weed hook to rid themselves of the threat. For University of Illinois Extension, I'm Todd Gleason.
The USDA announced the nomination period for anyone who would like to serve for local Farm Service Agency county committees. Nominations will begin next week. The committee acts as a link between the FSA and the local community. To be eligible, a person must participate or cooperate in a program administered by FSA, be eligible to vote in county committee election, and reside in the local administrative area in which the person is a candidate. To become a candidate or to find out more information, contact your local FSA office or check out the USDA website. Well, Fred just couldn't resist this one. What is it with him and drones? Endorsed by the federal government, unmanned drones are now buzzing over California's Yolo County, and the weapons they use could help farmers grow better crops. Rob McAllister has the story.
Flying just several feet above crops in Yolo County is the Yamaha ARMMAX remote-controlled helicopter, an unmanned drone.
Very specific, very targeted, very precise.
No, not targeting suspected Al-Qaeda insurgents or enemy bunkers, but pesky crop-eating bugs.
It's surprisingly easy to operate.
UC Davis professor Ken Giles is an ag engineer. He says this chopper, weighing 200 pounds and about half the size of a golf cart, is used specifically for crops and will never fly over neighborhoods. They have to notify the FAA before even taking off. His team is looking for ways to help farmers spray and save.
This is an example of a sprayer that the helicopter might replace.
He says the traditional ground or aircraft crop sprayers use more chemicals than necessary.
With the aircraft, we can treat 3 or 4 acres in much less volume. Maybe a 100th the volume that this would take.
And most ground sprayers can't negotiate tough terrain.
Sloping ground, a place that might be difficult to access otherwise.
The wine industry may be interested.
Grapes in Sonoma, Napa areas where you have hillside applications, very steep hillside, times when we don't have access by ground.
This drone can offer 2 invaluable benefits: safety and efficiency.
We think ultimately it removes an operator from being exposed to the chemical, and it also allows that chemical to be placed exactly where we want it in just the areas that we need it without having to treat the whole field.
Giles also says drones are already being commercially used by about 2,500 operators in Japan. And if a drone isn't in your future, at least for now, you can check out how the soybeans are doing statewide with SoyCam, a service of the Illinois Soybean Association. Various farmers are taking weekly pictures of their beans and posting them on soycam.com for everyone to see. So does that mean that farmers don't have to drive 15 miles under the speed limit to check out the crops?
No, Monica, that's going to be a given. It's like checkered shirts and free seed caps. It's not going away. Well, something that might be going away is the pattern of wet weather. I talked to state climatologist Jim Angel about what lays ahead.
And with me today is Dr. Jim Angel. He's the state climatologist for the Illinois State Water Survey and the state of Illinois. And Jim, you don't wear this as a badge, but you are the drought buster. You've declared the drought over this spring. So I thought, given the fact that the drought is definitely over, I'd ask you, where are we at and where are we going?
That's right. Yeah, it's a big change from this time last year where we're getting into the heart of the drought at the June time frame. This year, it's been very wet. We were actually still concerned about some parts of Illinois being dry into this spring, especially the northern part of the state, up through April. But about mid-April, suddenly somebody turned on the sprinkler system and we got tons of rain. So
it's more of a fire hose, buddy.
Maybe that's fire hose might be the better. And so now we've had one of the wettest Aprils, one of the wettest Mays, and one of the wettest springs on record. In fact, it was the fifth wettest on record for the March, April, May time frame. Now, June has kind of slowed down a little bit. We kind of get back to something closer to normal for this time of year. So it's kind of given us at least a few weeks break from the really heavy stuff. But yeah, it's been a real turnaround from this time last year.
So you mentioned that we may see a little bit of a break, and hopefully everybody will get the beans in now. But is this a change in the patterns, or is this a natural occurring pattern this time of year?
Well, I think right now we're back to something a little closer to what we would expect for this time of year, which is periods of rainfall followed by some nice breaks and get a little recovery time between these rain systems. What we had in April and on into May, and even the very first day or two of June, was these very intense, heavy rainfall events that moved through some of our western state to the west of us and moved across Illinois that dumped a lot of rain. Sometimes some of these systems were dropping 3 or 4 inches of rain at a time, and that is pretty wet for us. And so we had quite a few of them. They're coming in about every 5 or 6 days. So we weren't getting much break between them. And now it's quieted down just a little bit. So we had a couple of events that weren't quite as juicy, so they didn't produce quite as much rain. So that's helped out.
Now, a farmer friend of ours, or mine at least, said that you're never more than 10 days away from a drought. Do you see any indication that we may drift back into a much drier period?
Well, it's always a possibility. In fact, one of the things we're always kind of worried about is what we call a flash drought, which can happen just about any time and anywhere in Illinois that, suddenly it'd be wet, and the next thing you know, it just literally stops raining, and especially this time of year as the temperatures heat up, the demand on that soil moisture just skyrockets. So it just takes a couple of weeks and you can start to get into trouble. I'm not sure 10 days is quite the number, but if you get a couple of weeks, you can start to get into trouble with the soils here in central Illinois. They hold so much moisture that we can cruise along for a while, but it does get to be problematic about 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, I think last year is a good example of we could cruise along for a long time before we really got into trouble, but we just as soon not, right?
That's right. We just do not do that.
Okay, Dr. Jim Angel, state climatologist, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Cameron is finishing up his vacation, if you call going to Colorado to shoot a documentary a vacation, and he'll be back next week. So this week, we went back into the archives and found a favorite segment. Cameron looked deep into the history books to find out how the school calendar and the farming calendars came to look the way they are on this week's Under the Four River Skies.
Before the Weather Channel, National Weather Service, and when not everyone had a thermometer, people wrote about the weather in their personal journals and diaries. For my thesis, my objective was to sift through daily journal entries looking for any weather descriptors or actual temperatures the author wrote down. While reading every entry for every day, I was immersed in the daily functions of the author's life. I learned about how one author soothed their child's sore throat by giving them turpentine, or calm an upset stomach by giving a dose of tar. Interesting, right? But I also learned about the school year from one author who was a school teacher one part of the year and a farmer the other part of the year. William Scudder of Indianapolis lived during the early to mid-19th century. As I began to read the first page of his diary that began in the summer, I learned about his daily tasks as a farmer. He wrote what he did on a particular day and recorded the costs of hay, feed, equipment, and so much more. As the entries turned from summer to fall, his focus was on the upcoming state fair and harvest. You are probably picturing the state fair as an end to the summer event, just before school begins. However, the state fair in the 19th century was actually in October and sometimes in September. Harvest also occurred around that time as well. Mr. Scudder's diary then shifted from how well the harvest went to preparing for the new school year. School started in late October or November? At first I was confused and found that other authors' diaries stated the same situation. The school year began in the late fall. I was interested in this because I always thought school started in late August, but I got to thinking about that time in history. Farmers needed every hand possible to work the land and complete the daily tasks of the farm. This included their children. Children having to do hard farm work probably looked forward to the harvest season, but at the same time probably dreaded the idea of having to begin schoolwork, not to mention having to walk to school uphill both ways. During the school season, children probably had to wake up very early to take care of the livestock or collect wood to keep the home warm. It is also during this time that the father and mother concentrated their efforts on fixing up the dwelling or catching up with old friends. As the winter season began to show signs of dwindling, with the first buds bursting forth, the focus of the farmstead turned to preparing the fields for planting. The school season was wrapping up so that all available hands could begin their planting season tasks. The school year was based on the growing season. School ended when it was time to prepare the fields. School began when the last grain was harvested, a time different from today when many farmers use farm equipment to work the land with fewer hands. Someday in the future, I would like to survey the children of today to see how they would view the school season a century and a half before their time. I am sure some answers would include, would I be able to text my friends or update my status on Facebook? There is so much more we can learn from those before us. Whether it is from a diary left in the trunk of artifacts, or just a sit-down discussion with a wise grandmother or grandfather, we all would gain a different perspective of what life was like before us. Take time to listen to those wise old stories, because one day you will be the storyteller for the next generation.
Hi, I'm Jessica Killow with your Inside Extension. On June 6th, the University of Illinois Extension Unit 19 Family Life Educator Sherry Burcham spoke at the Lifespan Center in Coles County. The presentation was given as part of the center's Dine and Shine event. Burcham's interactive presentation focused on the importance of positive and effective communication between grandchildren and family members. For more information on University of Illinois Extension or on family life programming, visit our website. On Tuesday, June 4th, Coles County 4-Hers met at the fairgrounds to show rockets they had built. As part of a 4-H aerospace project, 4-Hers built and launched model rockets. The rockets were judged based on the 4-Hers' knowledge of aerospace concepts, the explanation of the project, and the appearance of the rocket. The grand champion and State Fair delegate for Model Rocketry 2013 is Wyatt Ferguson, and the reserve champion and State Fair alternate is Jonathan Bell. After judging, the 4-Hers launched their rockets at the fairground. The Cumberland County Barbecue will be June 29th from 4:30 until 8 o'clock p.m. at the Toledo Christian Church at 501 South Maryland Street in Toledo, Illinois. Meat choices include pork chops, pulled pork, and pork burgers. Side dishes, dessert, and a drink will also be provided. Purchase tickets from a Cumberland County 4-Her or at the Cumberland Extension office at 849 3931. And as always, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and visit our website to stay up to date on our programming. From U of I Extension serving Coles, Cumberland, Moultrie, Douglas, and Shelby counties, this has been Jessica Killow with your Inside Extension.
And finally, farmers all over our area had a tough time getting the crop in, and once in, faced a tough time managing a young crop in an already wet field. Well, one of our crop guys, Todd Wattle, may be a Frank Zappa fan because necessity was the mother of invention. Fields too wet for a fixed wheel sprayer? No problem. Hook the sprayer up to a much smaller Gator, and voila, the job is done. Todd reports that he did over 1,800 acres with the Gator. And while his fields may not have to live with compaction that a fixed wheel sprayer may have caused, no word yet on, how can I say this, how Todd's back 40 dealt with the compaction that the Gator seat may have caused.
Well, apparently, man's gotta do what a man's gotta do.
Well, this man has to say, work hard, be safe, and enjoy the beautiful sunsets. I'm Fred Peralta.
And I'm Monica Becker. Thanks for watching the Four Rivers Ag Report.